everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Podcast Demastered. I'm Chelsea, and I'm here with Wade as always. And on this episode, we are going to talk about the latest book in the World of Eragon, and that would be Murtagh. And actually, so this episode is coming out in July of this year. Last July, we actually covered the prior books in the series, as well as the movie that does not exist. So if you guys haven't listened
Indeed.
to those, you guys should go back and listen to us talk all about that and our love of this world created by Christopher Paolini. So this book, Murtagh, takes place after the four main books. There is actually a book in between that is a collection of short stories called The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm, which both Wade and I have read. And it's actually a good starting point for this next book, because the first little short story in that collection is a different point of view of the beginning of this book.
It is, yeah. Which, when I started to read Murtagh, the book, and it gets to that point, I was like, oh, are we going to just kind of vaguely skip over this? Is the assumption that you're supposed to have read this already? But it doesn't. It just keeps it in Murtagh's perception while it continues the story, which was great, because in the tale before, in the Fork story, it's through the eyes of this little girl, this girl who is the daughter of the tavern owner, essentially. But now you get what's happening through Murtagh's perception, so you know why he's there and what he's doing. So it was nice to see to have all of those answers given to us finally.
Yeah. And just a little bit of background before we dive into the story with this book is that Christopher Paolini has been working on this series for a very long time. This book came out last year in 2023, which was technically the 20th anniversary of the release of the very first book, Eragon.
Which is crazy, because we were 12 when those books came out, 12, 13. And he wasn't that much older than that when he released the first Eragon book. Mm-hmm. These Eragon books have literally been his life.
Yeah.
Which he has gone on to write more stuff. He's got some science fiction stuff I have on my reading list, but I haven't gone to get them yet. Mm-hmm. But I think he just released another one of those books, didn't he?
Yes.
I don't know if it's a sequel to one of them or not.
It might be a prequel, maybe, is what I saw.
I don't know.
Or something. Yeah. But there's two books out of
stuff that I do want to read, because I enjoy his writing style, and I'd love to see some sci-fi that he's come up with. So, one of them's Fractal Noise.
Yes.
And that's the first one that he wrote coming out of Eragon.
So yeah, those are definitely ones we'll have to check out at some point, and maybe we'll talk about it on the podcast if people are interested. But
our Eragon month will change to Christopher Paolini month.
There we go. Exactly.
Solve the problem. Next July, folks.
Yes. But Murtagh. So this book follows our other hopeful protagonists. We have a lot of kind of main characters within the World of Eragon. Obviously, our main character that we followed along in the first four books was Eragon himself. But now we are following, and we're really getting more into the mind of Murtagh, his half-brother, who the story picks up, I guess, it's almost a little bit a year after Inheritance. And so we kind of get to follow along what he's been up to after all the things after the fall of Galbatorix, and basically being free from slavery, essentially. And he's just this
literal slavery.
Yeah. And this book is pretty dark, and
it's a tone different than Eragon, but which comes completely from Murtagh's pretty awful life he's had to live, especially in the last couple years of his life, where he's been body and soul enslaved to Galbatorix. It's there hasn't really been any free will to speak of.
Yeah. And so we see that specifically with his character as well as his dragon Thorn. We get a lot more about especially with Murtagh specifically, when he was younger, we get some flashbacks and stuff to growing up and the people who he clung to as a good influence, as well as those around him that treated him terribly. And this book in entirety, like you said, it's dark because it covers more heavier themes, I would say, because we have a lot of with abuse, with a lot of PTSD.
Lots of it.
Because specifically with Thorn, because Thorn is the dragon, his companion, and Thorn had a very different upbringing than with Eragon and Saphira. because Galbatorix like used magic and stuff to like force him to grow up so fast to be the size he is, but he's basically still almost like the mind of like a baby dragon and like an adult body.
But
And
one who has been like tortured its entire life,
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and or forced into extremely hurtful situations by having to like fight Saphira and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Thorn.
Yeah, and it's just given him just so much fear too of like he's also very like claustrophobic because he has been in like such tight containment of locked up and like a cage basically most of his time with Galbatorix, and so like we get a lot of moments throughout of him trying to battle this fear and trying to get through. And this book also deals with a lot of like them trying to heal, so we get a lot of like moments of them together, and it's really interesting because like I said, it's just such a different like companionship versus Eragon and Saphira, because like it seemed like Eragon and Saphira were almost like essentially like perfect together.
Their teamwork was impeccable, and it wasn't like they were just strength and strength put together. No matter the situation, they would come out on top. But with Murtagh and Thorn, there's a lot of working backwards. Almost because of their upbringing and most previous experiences, there's a lot of trauma and just really terribleness to get through. So it's created a lot of weaknesses in both of them. But we do get to see the one cover the weaknesses of the other one. Like if one of them is having a moment, the other one is there to protect and support. And then later on they try to work on those weaknesses together as like a form of training almost. They're very patient with each other. You get a lot of those moments, especially the deeper into the book that you get. And that was so different to see, especially like with Eragon and Saphira, who don't have to worry about that. You get Eragon who's like, I'm not strong enough to do the thing, and Saphira just kind of sits there like a cat and laughs at him. Yeah. Like she's like, so get stronger. Like, I don't know what you want me to do.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. She's also so sassy. Like I feel like
She's
Thorn
so
has a little bit of an attitude, but like they're just trying to help each other get through everything.
One day he'll probably get there, but he's still just so like immature, like not in a bad way. It's just he's like you said, he has the brain of like a baby dragon basically. Yeah. He hasn't experienced as much as Saphira has. He just has not lived as long as she has, even though he's like about the same size as her, but that's just because magic forced his body to physically grow.
Yeah. And so it's just an interesting thing because you're just like, they've already known each other for a while and they're like, they had that connection, but we see them, like we've said, like work through things together, but also grow together as like forming a better bond with each other, because they're also the only people they realize that can rely on each other. They're the only people that they trust because of everything they've been through in life. They just can't trust anybody else. And there's, we'll talk about, so where the story initially starts is basically, like we said, with the story from The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm, which is basically at this tavern. You have Murtagh, who has been kind of traveling around Alagasia, trying to like kind of stay in the shadows because everybody doesn't really know what happened with Galbatorix, and not everybody knows the complete truth that like he was able to break free of the control and help defeat Galbatorix. Everybody just thinks it's Eragon is our savior and he did everything, and Murtagh is villain bad.
Yeah, and Murtagh has a little bit of saltiness,
which
although like understandable, yeah, and he sees that as something that was bound to happen. He understands why people choose to believe that, but also like why it needs to be that way too. So like his moments of saltiness, they're not lasting. He is a teenage boy. So they come up and he kind of reasons himself down, and someday maybe we'll get a nice conversation between Eragon and Murtagh on that subject. I really hope so. Like, we spend so much time in Murtagh's head, and he talks so much about like that non-relationship with Eragon, which we know from Eragon's perspective, like that relationship started out so good.
Yes.
And if they had never known about like their parentage and their connection, their familial bond that they technically had, their relationship would look completely different right now. And Murtagh is trying to let those things go. Like, they're not important because they weren't important before. But like with how his dad was treated versus how Brahm treated and everything else, there's stuff that he has to work through. But you listen to him talk to himself, and you're like, boy, you just need some therapy. Like, come on, let's go.
Yeah.
But like, also, he would be there for it too. Like, he would go to therapy if that was such a thing.
Because he wants to be able to like work through it and move past it, because it's something that just haunts him all the time, because he's been through so much. And it's hard for him to not compare himself to Eragon because of Eragon. Everybody's talks to him and stuff with that, and being like, yeah, that my upbringing versus this and that. But we do see him work through some of that, like we said, throughout the story, where he does kind of like acknowledge, like, I do like Eragon and I want us to get to some point, but it's still annoying because he's still kind of like the kind of perfect brother that he wishes he could be, or like, kind of thing. But he does.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. He does pick up some things, like he's like learned from hanging out with Eragon and Eragon's experience that helps him later on with different parts throughout the story, different struggles he goes to help overcome them. But initially, like we said, so he starts off at this tavern in the beginning, and it's just kind of this mystery where he has been looking for stuff, trying to figure out what's going on in the world around him. He's meeting with a sketchy, everybody has to have a meeting in a creepy tavern with a sketchy
absolutely
informant, and it doesn't go as planned, and they try to kill him, and he escapes, but he is left with this mysterious information about this witch Bashel and a like volcanic rock, and he's like, something is brewing, and like literally, but Murtagh in the sense is also just like, as a person, even though we've seen him, like, he was really good friends with Eragon in the beginning throughout the series, and then like just being basically a slave, controlled, because the biggest way that Galbactorix knew how to control people was by knowing their true names. And it's something that we also see throughout this book, that Thorin and Murtagh, before they go to sleep, they repeat their true names, because they're like, we're the only ones in control of ourselves. We acknowledge who we are. Like, this will help us go to sleep and get through each day. But okay, so with something is brewing out there, and that essentially Murtagh, as who he is as a person, he's not a bad person. We cannot ever view him as a villain. There is definitely some goodness in wanting to look out for other people, especially the little people out there, especially those who are in slavery, abused at any point. Like, he has a very strong sense of sticking up for them. So when he finds out this information about there's some witch out there causing problems, we need to go find out what's going on. And he tells Thorin, like, we're gonna do this. Thorin's kind of like, why is this our problem? Like, why can't we just live on our own?
Thorin is very like, why do we... Murtagh's like, we need to, like, get out there and protect the realm in ways that, like, Eragon can't, because he's got a lot on his plate right now, which, fair. And so does Arya, and so does Nasuada. He's like, we can't really exist right now anyway. We can be the ones to do this. And Thorin is like, dude, were you not there the last few years? Like, we can also just not, and we can just chill, and we can be fun friends and go frolic and eat sheep. We don't have to do any of this nonsense. Yeah. And Murtagh's like, we're going.
Yeah.
And Thorin's like, fine, whatever, man.
Yeah.
Not like I'm a dragon and can't stop you, but okay.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. But that's what we see, a little bit of that conflict between them, of being like, I feel obligated to, like, save the world, and Thorin's just being like, nobody deserves us. Like, we deserve taking care of ourselves. Yeah. But it's interesting because this book is kind of broken up into certain sections depending on where they travel to. And within each area, like, that's like the overall title of each section. And then there's chapters for each, like, city they're in. It's kind of interesting how it's broken up, because especially when you get to the end, it's like the last chapter is chapter 1. And you're like, okay, what a cliffhanger. But we will get to that later. What a tease. But essentially, this is just a big journey for Murtagh and Thorin to figure out who this witch is and what her grand plan is. And so he has to go through different areas in order to get information, which it's interesting because the section where he's at, I think it's Siyunan at the beginning, where it's almost like the most lighthearted part of the book. because he finds community with the soldiers. Because there's a part where he's told we get a werecat involved about like, I will give you information, but you need to help me. You need to rescue these werecats children who have been taken, and you need to figure out what's going on. And so it becomes this whole complicated plot of you have to join like the army, but in order to do that, you need to win favor for them. So you need to catch and
so
kill
in order to do that,
yeah,
there's this fish who's like eating people in this lake. Can you go like do something about that? And Murtagh is like, I know some magic. That should be a piece of cake. So he gets out there and it's just like, all right, little fish, let's go. And it's like some behemoth size monstrosity who's absolutely resistant to magic. And he, again, like Murtagh just like sees him eating people, and Murtagh's like, okay, well that's a little different. So, okay, but that like when they're like, okay, you need to do this, you have to take like the scale of poor Glader, who's dead, who you killed. Like, you need to go get his scale
from his grave that everybody is by.
Yeah, seriously. And you're going to like use that as bait for the fish. But like the fight with the fish was my least favorite part of the book, because I'm like listening, just like white in the face, just like like
it's
ew.
And so they
he painted way too good of a portrait of what was happening, especially afterwards, like after the fight. I was like, you didn't have to tell me all of this, Christopher. You really didn't.
Nope. You're gonna keep getting that, and we'll get more of that later too. It's just we'll keep coming with all the details. But essentially, yes, he is very lucky with defeating this fish. Which actually we should mention at the beginning right now that Murtagh is not as experienced with magic as compared to Eragon, who studied with like the elves and everything. And
like you have to think about that. You have to remember that like Murtagh, for a while, he did grow up in like fancy castle court. You know, he grew up as a fancy pants.
Yes, he is a fancy boy.
But he wasn't trained as anything until like he ran away till like after he came back and was, you know, forced to do all of these awful things. But there wasn't really any magical training given. Like, he was taught a couple spells, like forced into him basically, and that's it. He never had like a magical mentor. He doesn't know like words of power. He doesn't really know anything. So I had to have a conversation with myself about that, because he's trying to figure out like the best way to take on this fish and like protect himself at the same time. And all of those things came naturally to Eragon by the end of his story, because he had received so much magical training. But then the book reminds you about it. Like Murtagh thinks of like, well, if only I had been, you know, trained in the same ways that Eragon. That's not fair. But it's like, oh yeah, like you don't really know a whole lot. Like you heard Eragon shout a few things sometime, and you're just kind of repeating what he said. Which, with this magic system, not a great way to go about doing things.
No, it's very dangerous. Yeah,
very dangerous. But you know, he figured it out with the fish. Like he did some pretty cool things.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting what you see with him is that because he does not have like that extensive knowledge that like Eragon has, he has to get really creative, and he really also because he also specifically has the different upbringing compared to Eragon, where he was basically like around royalty, treated royalty, did all like the fancy stuff, where he enjoyed like the arts, dancing, learning things, and so like he clearly grew up as a person who knew how to read and write, which is completely different from Eragon, who had to learn all that while learning magic. And like you see this just like crazy like super speed of learning. So you have somebody who has that background who's trying to be like, okay, but like what is magic, like what are these words, and trying to be like, how can I make a spell with a bunch of like, if this happens then this, or if this and that. So he puts all these kind of like interesting thought process into what he can do with spells to try to like craft his way around things, because that becomes a big deal with this story, is that magic is not the answer to everything, and the magic that he knows can't get him out of all these situations.
Although he tries, he really wants it to be the answer.
Yes.
But he just doesn't know enough.
Yeah, because he thinks that he, like, especially at the beginning, he's like, I've got magic down because there's only one thing you need to know, and that's the name of names. And I will just cockily use it around everybody.
Is like, it's like the Deus Ex Machina that they end up, like, Eragon ends up using to to beat Galbatorix for the most part. So Eragon knows the word, Arya knows the word, and Murtagh knows the word. Murtagh is the most afraid of the word, and they're all like, we shouldn't use it. This is not something that we can use because we don't want people to know about it. And then, like, Murtagh is here just running around, like, using it as, like, a seasoning for everything else. Like, well, I can use this with the word of power, like...
Because I can beat anything. You watch out.
Yeah, because I can make it... Like, I don't need to know things if I can just use the word, like... Okay.
Yes, but it does fail him quite often in this book. He learns that because there's this other magic out there, and he discovers, like, in the beginning of the tavern, that there's also this bird skull amulet that has some type of mystical power that was preventing his spells,
like nullifying.
Yes.
Yeah, like nullifying his spells.
But one of the highlights is that after he kills the creepy creature from the lake, he gets to join, like, the guard and gets to train, and you see this moment where he just feels almost like he's found a place, like he's found his home, because he just loves the aspect of just training, hanging out with like-minded people. But the problem is he's there on a mission, so this little bit of happiness he has found will not last, and it continues not to last for, like, the entirety of the book. It's just...
Yeah, well, you know, like, what he needs, like, anytime he gets himself into a situation, whatever it is that he needs, like, he has to betray in order to get the thing that he needs to do the next thing, which is really unfortunate because, like, he made a couple friends in the guards unit and almost came down to, like, having to kill them to move on, like, which is so rough for poor Murtagh, like, poor guy.
Yeah, and it's so hard for him, but it's, like, it's a part that he knows, like, especially with his true name, about, like, he betrays everybody, and you're just like, if you wish people would know, like, his whole story, and that it's not necessarily him, like, he's betraying, like, the friends he made in the guard because he has to do this stuff to help other people, and it's just... it continuously gets to him. But some interesting tidbits that I think will definitely become important later on, especially in future books, that we learn is that while he is saving, like, the Weird Cat child and stuff, that there have been people in this city who have been practicing and dealing with interesting types of magic. And one hint we get that is that the head guard, I think, or, like, the commander or something in charge, he has all these masks that, like, they're really interesting masks that he said he's collected over the years, and that if you put them on, they almost kind of, like, transform you into the creature that's portrayed, but it's kind of like this, like, illusion, very trippy effect. But while he's down underneath the city, he also discovers an egg, a black egg, which...
Oh, right. Oh, gosh.
Which you thought they were all destroyed, but that means that the Razak will live, and that there's more out there. And it's such a shame he did not know what it was at the time, otherwise he would have destroyed it. And he does say that later on. He's like, if I knew what that was, I would have gone down there. And he almost was tempted to go back. And you're just like, oh no. Because the whole thing with the prior books was that they thought they had destroyed them all because they did not want these creatures to ever be a problem ever again. Because those became such a real threat for Eragon and company throughout the other books. So that was a big deal with that. We also get... a little bit of knowledge that it happens, I guess, a little bit later in the story, but that giant, like, evil fish that he killed, and, like, which you find out was direct connection to Durza. Durza was a big antagonist we had, specifically in Eragon, the first book. He was a shade and very problematic, and was working for very, very problematic.
Very problematic, yeah.
He was working under Galbatorix, very powerful, and so apparently you find out, like, one day in the past, he, just to spite people, he, like, cursed that fish or whatever.
Yeah, he saw people, like, teasing the fish and being almost cruel to them, so he took one of the fish and, like, cursed the heck out of the fish so it would, like, be invincible and continue to grow and, like, terrorize this town, basically.
Yeah, and you're like, cool, yep. So, a little bit of interesting things there.
Spot on for Durza, yeah, sounds right.
But then once Murtagh saves the Werecat and stuff, then he continues on his quest, essentially, which is leading to a big chunk of this book, is dealing with...
Off to the main event, yeah.
Yes, which is finding Bashel. And this is where things
Oh,
get even...
Michelle. We
Oh,
enter like such new territory here.
yes. In so many ways of new territory, from like place that like nobody ever goes to or has been to before, this part of the land, and that like they're a group that's very dedicated to their cause. They don't ever leave. They want you to stay. Welcome to this cult.
And that's a light word for it too. Like,
Yes.
holy heck.
It's just so that like the rest of the book is just like it's not really like a complete ick factor, but it's so uncomfortable because you're just like, oh gosh, the vibes of everything. It's I don't know, this part was like really draining to me because it was just like,
Well, no, it was, and you kind of get that from Murtagh too, where like he gets there, and at first he's like they're very antagonistic towards him, but then they're like, oh, Thorn,
yeah,
like, oh, you're Murtagh. Oh, you are. Oh, we know who you are.
Yes.
Yeah, well, because they're like praising Thorn. They're all like, oh, like praise be to the dragon. And
Yes.
Michelle is like, oh, pretty Thorn, like you can be our guest. And Thorn at first is like, that's kind of cool. Like he's not sure about it, but he's like, it's better than how he usually gets greeted.
Yeah.
So he becomes like an honored guest kind of.
Yes.
To these very interesting people.
I think the like whole air they call themselves like the Dreamers. It should clarify.
They do.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, yes. Which you find out very fast. Like that's not really kept from you. That's who they are, and they believe basically in the power of like apocalyptic nightmares.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of how Michelle rules everybody. Is they sleep and then they come tell her their dreams. And she kind of interprets them for them if it's something to be interpreted. But that's kind of like where the power comes from, is by dreaming. But you find out she can like force dreams into people. Like they're not dreaming of their own free will, basically.
But then you also find out, like, I don't think it's really a specific spoiler at this point to say, like, she claims that she is speaking for another. That, like,
for like a god.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's named like Aslagor, and this is the thing they worship, and she's the only one that knows what's right for everybody because she is following somebody else and everybody needs to listen to her.
And because of the dreams that people have, they believe her. They're like they wait on her hand and foot. They do everything required of them, and they have this weird hierarchy, and it's all very interesting to learn about, like with Murtagh right in the middle of it. But it's also like they keep girls who, like maidens, who have never been touched by a man at all. Like zero
like
skin contact.
Yeah, exactly.
Never, ever. And Murtagh kind of befriends one of them. He kind of uses her to kind of understand, like, the propaganda that Michelle has, spouted. As things go on, you find out that Michelle is actually, like, extremely old.
Yes.
Like, she's older. She's been around longer than Galbatorix was, like, by a long shot.
Yeah. And that you find out she's also half elf, and that's also a part of why she has lived so long.
And isn't she the one, that killed Galbatorix' dragon in the first place?
I think
she was directly involved with basically the, like, creation of Galbatorix, with, like, who he ended up becoming.
Yeah.
Like, he went, because, they went there to, like, stop them, to, like, territorialize the area. And she's like, no, you're not going to do that, actually. And then she, like, wipe out his army and kill his dragon, and, like, he escapes.
Yeah. I think the story
like
was true. I think it was, like, an Urgle or something group that did kill the dragon, but she definitely had a heavy hand in that cause and effect situation. And this is where you find out it's really interesting because this book really delves into, like, a lot of extra information about these characters where you thought, like, the greatest evil there was Galbatorix at the time, and that, like, he was acting on his own accord and he created the Forsworn, and that is that. But then through this, and Michelle, she's kind of like, everything you think you know is not quite the truth. Like, I've been here this whole time. I'm the one who manipulated, and they were under my control because we answer to a higher power. Galbatorix is not that. And Murtagh's kind of like, I don't understand this. This is so hard to believe because Galbatorix himself was such a manipulative, just like straight up evil man. Like, he must have just been following along because of, like, it fit his agenda. But then you find out, like, well, Yeah, but no. Michelle has been using all these people behind the scenes for years, has been working with trying to manipulate things, because you find out her dreamers, the followers out there, they are spread all throughout Alagasia. They are within parts of like Naswada's like close group of people. They are in
like they're in all forms of power across the land, like just kind of listening and watching and relaying information basically back to Bashel.
and you're just kind of like, oh crap, like there's this bigger thing like starring for a long time in Alagasia. Like there is more to this than what you think. And you're kind of like, I'm glad he stumbled across this, but also he was also kind of the worst person to stumble across this, because it just adds more to his trauma manipulation. Because like, you know, it starts out as their guest, you know, don't look too far behind the curtain. Everything's great here. We are just all super happy, obedient people. And don't worry, if you follow us, we're all good. And he's just kind of like, I don't know about this. This is kind of weird. Like, I'm Murtagh. I don't want to like sit around doing nothing. I need to find answers. But of course, like when he like further infiltrates this cult of being like, what is really going on? Like, sure, everything seems so bright and shiny on the surface about, of course, you know, there's somebody that's in higher power that they're all praising. And then you're like, wait a minute, what are they wanting this like higher power to do? Like, what are they expecting? And it's like revealed to be like that Aslagor is gonna like make the world anew, destroy everything, and then recreate like the world again in like their own image or whatever, their own plans. And you're kind of like, oh, okay, so they're gonna kill everybody.
And isn't Aslagor seen to be like some gigantic sleeping dragon god?
Yes,
like,
that's my understanding.
Who could be like living underneath like the surface of the planet, basically.
Yes, who could be the literal ground itself, is what I
the thought of that is like the slow like realization they get to that point is just like terrifying.
Yeah.
But then you're like, no. But then like the closer you get to the end of the book, you're like, oh my god, this is true. Like,
yeah,
this is bad. This is bad for everything. Absolutely everything. In Murtagh, it's just like, how are we gonna stop this? Let alone like get away, like survive escaping this area, because things just get so bad so fast. Because it gets to a point where Bashel's basically like, all right, one man war against us, let's go. That's fine with me. And she gets to a point where she's basically like enslaved him and Thor. Like they find out too much basically, and they get captured. And she has this stuff that just kind of puts him into like a waking sleep. And she becomes his slave, like even more so than he was to Galbatorix. Like,
yeah, because they put that stuff on him, and they also feed him the food and stuff that we've seen like Eragon had to eat in the past or whatever, like when he was in prison, like that allows them to like block the ability to use magic as well. But the only like good thing per se during this part is that Murtagh never gives up completely who he is. He never swears fealty to her. Like his whole thing is that he and Thorn will never like swear allegiance to anybody ever again. Like that's their thing. But like she still was able to get enough hold on him even without using his true name. It was still just this whole like he was just completely locked in as a slave. And if there wasn't for people who had a little bit of a heart, who felt a little bit of things different, because Alyn, it's the maiden that he meets early on, he continues to like try to like converse with her, but she doesn't want to have it at first because she is a sole believer in Aslagor and Bashel about what their cause is, and just like will not hear anything different until she realizes the treatment changes with Murtagh and Thorn, especially with Thorn being a dragon who's then like basically kept locked up until she wants them to do whatever her bidding is. And she's kind of like, that's not cool that like Bashel is treating this dragon who we basically view as our gods.
Yeah, like we should be venerating them and giving them everything. And she like has him in a cage, you know, doing all these terrible things to him. Like that's not how we treat dragons. Like can our religion be like incorrect, be wrong?
So Murtagh like finds a point of being able to like almost have a little bit of coherence to be like, can you help me like get out of this? And she's kind of like, hey, I don't know, like I can't commit to that. Like Michelle is the one who like took me in, like I fully believed in this cause, like I can't change it. But then because of the issue specifically with the treatment of Thorn and stuff, like it starts, yes, to crack like her beliefs. And basically she does end up helping Murtagh, like by like feeding him normal food per se, instead of this one laced with his ability to dampen his magic. But everything in this book just keeps building and building to like Michelle's plan, the plan for Aslogoros. Something big is going to happen, and like Murtagh's like, I can't let that happen. But another part that is kind of really terrible with Murtagh specifically is that because he is a slave to Michelle, like she sends him on these missions and stuff, and he's like not completely like there when he realizes what's happening, because he's like, oh yeah, we're gonna go fight an enemy, like, you know,
like what he sees during this missions is not reality.
No.
So like, oh, we're gonna go and slay like this village of Urgles because they're being awful like Urgles do, right? And it's not. It's just like
regular people, women, just children.
Yeah,
like,
women and children. Just, you know, whatever, man. Which, not a great awakening to realize that.
Awful.
You swore all of these things, like, I'll never be put in this situation again, and all these things. Like, oh, nope, we've actually just murdered a whole village of normal, everyday people. Just for funsies.
Yeah, and then you find out the ones that are left over, because one thing that Murtagh does notice when he is in this cult area of just creepiness is he's like, there's a lot of children here, a lot of younger people, but not as many adults. I'm not sure how that happened. Well, when he specifically is sent on a mission like this, the remaining people that are left are a lot of younger people, children and stuff, and they get sent right back to this area where Michelle and all of them have been living, and the whole goal is just for Michelle to keep having control over more people believing in the dreams just infecting everybody with the cause, and like basically trying to hopefully force all these people to join and become a part of this cult. So you have that keeping building, and it's all building to this big event, some type of celebration of like the black smoke or something like that is at the end. And
something like that, yeah.
Which, real quickly, another character to mention is that there is also an Urgle that's imprisoned.
Oh, right.
And this is a really interesting thing, because like with Eragon, his experience with the Urgles, like he went through a lot of like, oh my gosh, they're terrible, they killed people I cared about, to being like, you know, oh, we can respect them, they're really interesting, there's a lot more to them than just these so-called like savage beasts. But Murtagh didn't quite have the same experience. He didn't get to fight alongside them really, so he's kind of like, oh no, there's an Urgle over there, like, we don't deal with that. But then they form such a kinship, and they literally become like blood brothers at one point, because then they work together, and they like, which I think is fun to see that Murtagh has that experience, because it's kind of like with Eragon and like the dwarves and Ulrich and stuff, and how they have like their brother bond. But Murtagh finds his own, which then he realizes true, like, it's you're creating your own type of family. You can have this brotherly relationship with somebody that's not literally somebody you're related to.
Even in the same, like, species of people, like...
Yes. So they, like, strive to work together and try to escape as well, but then he also like has the help of Lynn, who's trying to like do what she can, but also still constantly just battling about like, Michelle's not respecting the dragons, but I still so fully believe in her. It's so hard, it's so dangerous for me to escape this cult like atmosphere. But
she gets her people with like this huge mixture of fascination by the things that she can do and the things that she knows and the things that come true, and fear. She gets them both ways.
Yeah.
She really locks them into that belief system. And so even if people falter on the faith, well, they still have the fear there to keep them in place.
Yeah.
And that in Elena, she's really struggling throughout the end of the book. Like, where do I go from here? What is right? What is wrong? I don't really understand how the world's supposed to be.
Yeah. And then she does finally take that leap of like, okay, I will do everything I can for you, Murtagh, but like, you have to take me with you. And as soon as she said that, I went, oh, she's dead. Like, there's no way.
Yeah, right.
This. I was like, yep. I was like,
yep. That sounds like a fridging waiting to happen.
Yep. 100%. So it just all boils down to this huge like black smoke event, and Murtagh eventually just fighting back. Everybody is fighting. It's just all out chaos. And then it's so much more fighting. Then you go underground because Bashel ends up taking Alyn. And like all of her guards like go underground to be closer to like Asligor and all the mystery behind that. And so it's a huge slog of just like battle after battle of just like trippiness of like Murtagh trying to find the magic within to basically let things go, but also he's not gonna leave without the people he promised he would leave with. And so more is just revealed, which like the underground part is when you realize like all this stuff is real that like Bashel's been talking about. Like there is definitely
you expect to be like, some kind of Scooby-Doo, like, oh, it's been this all along.
Yeah.
Nope. That's the terror in it, is that it's all true.
Yeah. And you're just like, oh crap. And then that there's so much more to the world than people even realize. There's so much more that like he's uncovered so much, Murtagh himself, and he knows that Eragon knows a lot, but there's so much more out there. There's more that he still has left to uncover, but it's bad. Whatever this is, it's bad. But eventually gets to a crazy fight, there's a part where we meet a character early on that is like still kind of living the good life, who was also like in like the palace of whatever with Galbatorix, like growing up with Murtagh, who like made fun of him and stuff. Yes. Which of course he has to be a minion of Bashel, but he gets just as Murtagh fights back and wins and kills him.
Well, like during that fight, they're like, he's like, I'll fight you. Like, I don't care. You were always like this nobody growing up. And my dad was so like rich and powerful. And now my brothers are dead. But I'm going to side with Bashel and I'm going to be powerful. Like, he doesn't mean like physically or magically powerful. He means like money, wealth, powerful. Like, all like, look around, dude. Do you see anything? Like, your money's not going to save you. And Murtagh is like, legit, you want to fight to the death with me? He's like, I'm so wounded. I don't have access to like half of my magic. I will slaughter you. Yeah. And the guy's like, I don't care. Let's go. And they fight. And like, Murtagh even ends up getting hurt a lot in this fight. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, put this man in the ground. Yeah. Get rid of him.
But he does.
He does end up winning. Mm-hmm. But it's a little too dramatic of a fight. For, like, that... No, he should have just, like, punched him in the nose, killed him, and been done with it. Like, come on now.
Yeah. But it's all those, like, magical wards and stuff, and this unknown magic that Bashel has, like, imbued on all of her, basically, the subjects and stuff to help protect them, all these things. And so it makes things a little more difficult. But yes... Yeah, I wish the fight was a little bit faster, but I'm glad Murtagh came out on top of that. But it's just, there's that. Then he also has to fight a bunch of other minions. And then, of course, he gets to the final showdown with Bashel, and he does defeat her. He does actually kill her, which
like, takes her head off? Something like that?
Yeah. She has very powerful, like, wards, things blocking everything that comes her way. And then he has to get really creative about being like, oh, there's like stuff in the ceiling and whatnot that I can like crash down on her to help like lower her like shielding. And then he takes off her head and you're just like, okay.
Like, dang. Wow, all right.
Yeah. You're like, okay. Because I was surprised. Like, I was like, because this whole book was definitely leading to the fact that there is plenty more story out there. So I'm like, what part are we going to end on?
Like, this is literally like, obviously like a prequel to another series. Like,
yes.
We're moving fast and things are going to get real ugly.
Yeah.
But he ends up killing her. Yeah. But that doesn't make you feel better.
No, because
it's like, cool, the immediate threat is gone. Like, maybe.
Yeah, but you're like, no, there is that something big is still out there.
Mm-hmm. But then he kills her and things get like momentarily better. Like, he's able to leave. Mm-hmm. The people who are left, he's kind of like, what are we gonna do? You saw how crazy things got there. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I don't know, man. But he ends up leaving, but he has big character growth moment. Because this whole time, Thorin's like, well, we could call Eragon. We can call Arya. You know, like, you do have friends and people who care about you. Mm-hmm. And Murtagh is like, well, but if you bring people in, then things can get more dramatic, and we don't want that. But he's like, okay, all hands on deck. All Dragon Rider hands on deck. We got some stuff going on. And that makes me happy. Like, it in a way, you can appreciate this. But you know, like in Kingdom Hearts 1, like Sora is like the Keyblade Master, and he's like the one. But, like, we finally get to, like, Kingdom Hearts 3, like, 12 games later, and, like, everybody has a Keyblade. I feel like that's where we're headed with the World of Eragon. Like, having a dragon and stuff like that was something that was so rare. But now, by this point, we have 3 whole dragon riders. It's whole 3 people. But Aragon's literally off attempting to train more, to find a home for the next generation. Even, like, just getting, like, Eragon and Arya and Murtagh in the same room would be, like, at this point, after, like, Murtagh's had this story, he's had all of this growth, I feel like getting them all together to go and fight this, like, new war situation is going to be so cool.
Yeah, I think that'll be really good, and we'll be able to see, like, those relationships, like, heal and just, like, grow stronger, too, between our core dragon risers, especially.
Well, that's all Murtagh needs. He just needs time to be with the other, he needs time to be with Eragon and fix all of that. He needs time to properly meet Arya and learn a little bit from her, too. Because, like, her and Murtagh's relationship is going to be, like, bonkers crazy different than her and Eragon's. But even, like, just, like, Murtagh and Naswada, which he spends the entirety of the book running from.
But also constantly thinking about.
Constantly, that's that
he's in love.
Will they, won't they?
Yeah.
Which they are already, but, like, they can't.
Yeah.
Well, he can't.
Supposedly,
she's ready.
We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, she's like, come live at the palace. I'll make all the excuses I need to, to get people to like you again. Like, I don't really give a crap. And he's like, yeah, but that's gonna hurt you, though. Like, that's gonna make you look like a big old hypocrite. And you have a literal, like, war terrorist, like, living next to you. We can't have that.
Yeah. And
you're going to be a strong queen, and I will absolutely, like, ruin that portrait of yourself that you've been trying to paint.
And she's kind of like, that's what you think. I think if you stayed longer, you would understand. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know who's got a better point to be made, but I'm absolutely willing to read about it.
That is true. Yes. I know. I'm kind of like, I'm here for this, but I'm also nervous at the same time. But I'm just just the chance, the opportunity.
The two of them deserve to be happy so much.
Yes.
Together, specifically.
Yeah. It's such an interesting pairing in some ways, but you're like, yep, it makes sense. But real quickly, before it gets to that part, I think one important thing to mention specifically, like, after the fight with Michelle and stuff, is that, like, Murtagh is, like, trapped basically underground, and the only person who can save him at that point is Thorn. But Thorn is still dealing with his severe, like, claustrophobia and everything, and it's just like, I can't do it. And, like, her girlfriend is kind of like, you're a freaking dragon. Go and get your rider. Like, what are you doing here? You can do this. Like, do not let him die. And Thorn is just like, nope, I'm gonna see you guys later. Like, bye. And he's like, where are you going? And finally Thorn does it and is like, it's excruciatingly painful and terrifying, but then it gets better and better, and he does get to Murtagh and save him. And you just find out, like, that this huge thing he's been struggling with constantly, he was able to do it because of Murtagh and because of being able to go out there. And so it's just a big relief because he saves Murtagh just in time, but also just fighting with the thing he's been afraid of the whole time. And then that is when he's like, I know where to take him. And then that's how they end up at the very end with Naswada and revealing to her, like, there is some stuff going on, like, your kingdom is not safe, like, I will do what I can, but I'm not gonna swear oaths to you or anybody, as you know. And then that's when they have their whole, like, well, they won't, they, will you stay? But there's another big hint of something even scarier, because while Murtagh was under the influence, under the control of Michelle, she had a bunch of guests coming and going. And he, like, recognized some of them, and he recognized one person in particular.
Oh, right, yeah.
Who's like, I know this person. I know they have a high-ranking position. They, like, are
like,
really close.
Who were they again?
Yeah, and he's like, Naswada, there is somebody in your ranks. He's like, I could not identify them at the time, but it's a big problem, and you need to watch out for yourself. And she's like, dude, I do that every single day of my life, but this seems like it's a big deal. Like, we will look into this. And, like, that's such a cliffhanger of, like, who the freaking heck is that person?
I know, we got, like, and whatever this new series is, there is so much to, like, wait for.
Yes.
you have like interpersonal relationships that need fixing, that need time to go in a direction. In so many relationships between so many different people, we have to catch up with so many people. Like there's so many characters that just were not even mentioned in this book because they don't have a connection to Murtagh yet. You have the overarching like, your world might be destroyed by this giant slumbering dragon god. But then you have like political intrigue with Niswada and this huge potential traitor.
Yeah.
You know?
Also, on top of that, totally forgot to mention, Murtagh changed the name of his sword.
Oh my
It's no longer Zarok, it's Ithring now. So, completely renamed it to mean freedom. Perfectly fixed him. So, yeah, we have that on top of all this, too.
Yeah, and, like, there's so many things going on. And there is, like, zero timeline right now on, like, when more books are coming.
Yeah. It's such
other
a
than
tease,
like
yeah.
they're working. He's working on stuff. But like outside of the new series, we have the television series.
Yes.
That's still being worked on, and he can't say anything other than like hang tight because it's gonna be worth it. And I need it.
I know.
I just
okay.
need it.
Now I'm a little hopeful we might get some information in the next couple weeks. I'm holding out hope we might find out at D23 because this is going to be a Disney Plus show, and that would be really cool. Because like he's repeatedly said like we should be getting more information about this soon, and I'm like, okay, well, Disney's had a lot of announcements here and there, but I'm like, well, the big event where we're supposed to get a variety of announcements on everything from the parks to all kinds of movies and shows, that would be really cool if that is one thing that is majorly teased there. So, listeners, I guess you'll find out in a couple weeks if we're wrong about that or not, but
it's just August 9th. It's here pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's pretty quick.
But yeah, so in general, I guess, well, specifically like that the show is a busy thing on the horizon. Christopher Paolini's also like still working on this whole other like science fiction series, which that also has a TV show that's currently in development as well. So he's currently busy with like
he's making bank. That's what he's doing. Heck yeah, Christopher Paolini.
Yeah, two different shows going on with his two series to be like, that's amazing, that big of a deal. Like that's so cool to like have both of your series like being adapted, and we can all hope that this show is going to be a better adaptation, which it seems like it's very likely than the that movie that kind of exists or whatever,
the thing that we don't talk about.
But yeah, no, and I know like Christopher Paolini like set up initially with like that this book Murtagh was not the original planned like fifth book in the series. Like this is not the official fifth book. But he realized that did you hear how this book like originally came to be?
No, I don't think so.
So it basically all started because of a tweet. Because a fan originally, like quite a few years ago, asked him, what is like Murtagh up to? What is he doing? And all like, he said it was like really late at night and he was kind of just like a little delirious. And he was like, well, Murtagh like enchanted a fork to be stronger than a sword. And Thorne's not happy about that. And that little tidbit had stuck with him for like years. So then that's why he incorporated that story into The Fork, the Witch, and the Worm. And then he kept thinking about that. And he's like, because this quote, book 5 or whatever, this next book coming out, it's going to be a time jump of some variety. And he realizes he needed to fill in some gaps. And he was like, well, I've always wanted to tell so many stories from so many different other characters' point of views. He's like, well, this might be the time to do the Murtagh story. And so we get the fork part as well as the crazy background with this other evil lurking in the background, and just definitely why we're left with some of those questions at the end of what's to come next. So definitely a lot in there. And that's the kind of the tidbit with that. The other interesting kind of fact, I guess, related to talking about like little tidbits or whatever about the creation of the story is that, our favorite witch, Angela.
I love Angela.
Yes, I love her too. So in an interview I watched recently, he said, did you guys know Angela appears in this book? And he's like, maybe you weren't paying close enough attention. He's like, Angela doesn't go by her name in this book. She is mentioned by one of the names the Urgles give her.
Oh, I think I caught that.
Yeah, so I think it's the part where Michelle tells a story about how some witch came to see her years and years ago, and that she or like she was that
Yeah.
she met a witch like outside the village. But Shell came to this woman. The woman didn't come to her. Like, and I think that's you're like, oh, so Angela knows a lot. She has been around the block, and
she's such an interesting character.
Yeah,
because she's silly. She's like Miss Frizzle, like levels of nonsense. But also, like, there's such a deeper, darker, like, side to that character that, like, it could be relevant. Maybe it's not. It doesn't really matter as far as, like, what the story needs of her right now. Yeah. And story-wise, she's not that important. Like, and at least until, I think, the Inheritance book, she doesn't actually do anything. She's always just there to kind of, like, be mysterious to Eragon. Or maybe she gives him something that helps him, But she herself doesn't really do a whole lot until that, like, I think it's Inheritance when they go on, like, the rescue mission. And she's on that mission, and she ends up, like, saving everybody. She's, like, the VIP of that mission. She's annoyed the entire time, but that she has to, like, put that much effort into everything she does.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested to see, like, where she goes.
Yes.
Like, in this new story, that's going to be more like, it's taking up more space than just Alagasia,
Yes. Yeah, and I think there's no doubt that we should be seeing more of her, because we didn't talk too much about the Fork, the Witch, and the Worm specifically, but the, like, other two stories in it, like, one of them is specifically where Angela does come to visit Eragon while he's setting up this new future home for the dragons and riders. And she's like, I wrote a story about myself. Like, I wrote, like, an autobiography. I want you to read it. And he's like, okay, sounds
here's
great.
Chapter, like, 2000. Here you go.
Yeah. I'm just gonna, here's just random things. Don't worry. It's all, like, in my head. Those are the chapters that are important right now. I need you to look it over. And he's like, but they're, like, all out of order. And she's like, no, they're not.
Don't worry.
You'll
about
understand.
It.
It's just you got all the pieces you need, and so you get this, like, these little glimpses into her life, but you're just like, this is such a tease, and more about, like, why is she there? Because she also, in the other part of the story, she brings Elva, who she's gonna continue to play a part in all of this. But she's just like, I have her under, like, my wing. I'm taking care of her. But yes, we have a lot of big players in all this. A lot of these characters we've been introduced to in all these books. It's gonna be interesting. That's all we could say. I'm looking forward to it. And I know another thing he mentioned was that Christopher Paolini specifically said that, like, Murtagh is, like, a darker book compared to, not that the other books don't, like, cover heavy issues and stuff, but, like, this one really covered a lot more. And he said that, like, not all the future books are going to be specifically that similar vibe and like the tone and everything of Murtagh. We're going to get still some of the a little bit lighter, but, like, not as dark, diving into things as much as in Murtagh. So we're a little bit of levity, or a little bit of, still taking that on, but also it kind of is in a sense because a lot of his readers were really close to his age when they read the book. So we have grown up with him, and so he has added more of his, like, life experiences and stuff, being able to cover some heavier topics. But yeah, any other final words?
I don't think so. So overall, I think we enjoyed our new look into this new Eragon book.
Yes.
But also, I wasn't expecting such a setup.
Yes, I would agree.
I thought it was gonna be like, here's just what Murtagh's been up to. Here's his own little adventure compared to, like, now we getting down to the nitty gritty, and please enjoy the next series to come.
Yes.
I wasn't expecting that. So we get to the end, and he's just like, all this stuff's going to be happening soon. It's like, okay. All right, then.
Yep.
Cool.
But we'll be here waiting.
We look forward to it. We will be. Maybe
exactly.
post-Eragon TV series.
Yes.
At that point.
Yes. Well, hopefully that means the series is going to be here sooner rather than later. I don't know.
Maybe.
It's probably a couple years out, though. Let's be real.
Yeah. But since it seems he himself is working extremely heavily on the series, hopefully, like, the series covers stuff that aren't specifically in the book. Like, you get a lot more background information, that we can carry forward. Like the Hunger Games movies were worked on so heavily by the author of the series too. Like, you can view the movies as almost like side-along companions to the books because they present so much more information from, like, outside the Hunger Games arena, like perspectives of other people as things were happening that you didn't get. Hopefully we get a lot of that Just make it like Games of Thronesy, where you have like 12 different plots going on that eventually kind of coalesce into one thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, but the books do in general have a lot of those plots, but I think it'll be good to see a show that is way closer to the source material, you know, that makes more sense and, you know, is not a whatever that was, you know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I think, yeah. So
with
leave it on
that.
Yes, with that.
I think we have completed year 2 of Eragon.
Yes.
Yeah.
So listeners, we hope you enjoyed this episode. And like we said, if you are curious or haven't listened to our prior discussions in the World of Eragon, we definitely recommend you go check those episodes out. But in general, if you're interested in future things we're going to discuss, we discuss all kinds of things, not just Eragon, also not just X-Men, even though we have a lot of X-Men.
We have had a lot of X-Men lately.
Yes.
So much X-Men. So you're welcome or sorry, depending on who you are.
Yes. Which we're not going to give that up anytime soon. We will have some more upcoming X-Men episodes, I'm sure, still covering the gigantic Cohen era itself, but with a mix of some other things in between. So be sure you follow or subscribe wherever you listen to our podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. You can follow us on social media at PodDemastered. You can also feel free to send us an email with your comments, questions, future episode ideas at demasteredpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, thanks so much for listening to this week's episode, and we hope you tune in to the next one.
See ya.